Hello, my name is Alexis Price, and this is my field assignment for Special Education 2110, which is also Characteristics and Needs of Exceptional Learners. So to begin, my observation placement this semester is at Carbondale Area Elementary School, and I'm in a kindergarten classroom with roughly about 25 students. So the lesson that my teacher presented was in Heggerty and CKLA skills, which basically means that this curriculum covers syllables of words, small words. The students learn how to read small words, nursery rhymes, and just sounding out the words in general. This particular lesson, the teacher was introducing a new nursery rhyme. So to begin the lesson, she just called everyone onto the floor and asked the students if they remembered previous nursery rhymes that they had done. So most of them did remember the nursery rhymes, and then she went ahead and introduced the nursery rhyme, which is Jack Be Nimble. She kind of explained the context of the nursery rhyme, and then she ended up playing a YouTube video just for a visual aid for the students. In this nursery rhyme, the character does jump over a candlestick. So of course the saying is Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, Jack jump over the candlestick. And once the story and the video ended, the teacher had the students form a line and she ended up placing a book in the middle of the carpet. So the book represented the candlestick that was in the nursery rhyme, and then one by one the students jumped over the book and they said the saying that was in the nursery rhyme. So the majority of the students were engaged throughout the lesson. A few were disengaged, which I'll talk about more in a little while. But most of the students really enjoyed the lesson, especially jumping over the book. A lot of them were like screeching and laughing, so they definitely enjoyed it. So when the teacher was asked, were there any specific adaptations used in the presentation and or assessment of material, she told me that it was kind of difficult to say they were adaptations just because these particular students were in the process of being evaluated and they were not approved for IEPs yet. These students had hard staying on task and often just kind of wandered around the room. So when coming up with lessons, this teacher told me that she really likes coming up with lessons that could involve movement. So, for example, this lesson incorporated the students jumping over the candlestick. Even in her classroom, I've seen her present countless lessons where she puts on a video, an interactive video for the students to engage with. And this really helps these students just because if they are moving, then they're focusing. So that's why she chose this particular lesson, because she knew that they would participate in jumping over the candlestick, which they did, and she just used positive reinforcement saying, I love how you participated. So some strategies to help promote staying on task are textbook mentions that some of these strategies include self-monitoring, having self-control, monitoring and modifying assignments, and using positive reinforcement. Like I mentioned, the teacher definitely used positive reinforcement when the students participated in jumping over the book, which in their eyes is the candlestick. So in this case, if a child had an intellectual disability, how would the teacher accommodate them? So to begin, the textbook lists several ways in which students with intellectual disabilities can be taught. So some of these strategies include defining and task analyzing the new knowledge of skills to be learned, providing systematic consequences for student performance through reinforcement, feedback, and error correction, making sure the instructional setting is like the generalization setting. Um, and those are just a few ways for a teacher to teach students with intellectual disabilities. I'm going to be completely honest, the teacher did already a lot of these already, um, so there wasn't really much in this case to modify if a student did have an intellectual disability because she was already using a lot of those tactics. So most of the time in kindergarten, students are just learning how to read, but if a reading disability is detected, then of course the teachers make accommodations and adaptations. The textbook explains that some ways to educate students with learning disabilities include using a commercial D1 reading program in which the reading skills are broken down into smaller steps to help those with the disability enforce learning, and just things like answering questions, using self-questioning, graphic organizers, examining text structure, and summarizing are all used as well. So in this case, if there was a student with a learning disability in this classroom during this lesson, then I feel the teacher maybe should start by just asking a lot of questions about the material and just kind of breaking it down step by step as opposed to just going on with the lesson. Of course, questions are asked, but maybe in this case we should ask a little more just to promote reading comprehension and making sure the child knows what is happening and what events are taking place. So, like I said, the teacher should ask a lot of questions throughout, just making sure that the child knows what's going on, and maybe before um, having the children jump over the candlestick, maybe they could create a graphic organizer just to make sure that they know the events that took place in the nursery rhyme. This particular lesson used a video with the words up on the screen. The words were read to them, but if the child still didn't understand, then maybe having someone working one-on-one with the child is the way to go in this particular case. So for students who have ADHD, this relates a lot to one of my previous slides that I mentioned about just keeping students on task. So the same things I mentioned before about keeping students on task is having positive reinforcement for on-task behavior, modifying assignments and instructional activities just to encourage success, teaching self-control, and then self-monitoring. So something the teacher can do in this lesson is pausing the video to kind of just give the student's mind just a break and a rest for a minute, just because sometimes the student just isn't able to stay on task for that long. And also, this is a good thing to pause the video because the teacher can ask questions and make sure the students are aware of the events that are happening. And also, during review of the nursery rhymes, the teacher can find a way to include movement. So in this particular case, Of course, they were jumping over the candlestick, but when going over the beginning nursery rhymes, before the lesson begins, maybe she could have them stand up, or if they go along with a specific movement, like Itsy Bitsy Spider, maybe they can do like the Itsy Bitsy Spider hand, just something to keep the children moving in this case is probably the best thing, just because they're moving around and their mind is going, therefore they will be engaged in the lesson. So what if there is a child in the classroom who has autism spectrum disorder? So it's important to remember that those who have ASD can differ in severity. Some students are able to handle the noises around them, able to handle the lights around them, and just any kind of sensory stimuli, and others are not. So in this case, you have to see what the child can handle. The textbook does mention some strategies to teach students with ASD, include strategies for shifting control and stimuli, forming routines, having reinforcement strategies, having alternate forms of communication if needed, and also self-management tactics, and providing clear instructions. So some adaptations that can be made during this lesson is, if possible, someone should work with the one-on-one with the child to just make sure they are staying on task during the lesson. And if the student does not feel comfortable jumping over the book, which represents the candlestick, maybe the teacher can provide an alternate assignment for them. Maybe they can draw Jack Be Nimble jumping over the candlestick instead of actually jumping over it themselves. However, if the student does want to jump over the book, it's just to remind them that they need to jump softly, just so that way they don't harm themselves. And then throughout the entire lesson, it's important to just say things that will lead up to transitioning into anything. So whether it's saying, oh, students, after we watch the video, then we are going to form a line, and just things like that, just because some students with ASD do struggle with transition issues. So this is my works cited. I just used our classroom textbook for this entire assignment. Thank you so much for listening, and that is my field assignment.